Okay, expert tip, talk to your kids. Name fears to tame fears. And I think this is really important. I know in my household, we have lots of different personalities. So sometimes some of my kids are really comfortable with talking about their fears while other aren't. So I think it's important to kind of maybe do some probing questions and sharing some of your fears, obviously age appropriately. Um, and hearing that, and even if they're not comfy talking about it, I think sometimes hearing that it's okay to be worried, it's okay to be fearful of certain things, that we're going to get through this together. Just listening and validating their fears, and that goes into the second point of listening, validating, helping them problem solve. When I'm working with kids in school but also at home, I like to have like A-B plan, like, okay, well, this could be a solution, but then also if that solution doesn't work, this could be a backup solution. And just really listening, even if we don't think it's a big worry, it's a real worry for them, and age appropriately, it's going to look different. My elementary school schooler, her problems are a lot different than my high schoolers, problems or worries. And just validating that. And sometimes I have to do that myself as a parent, reminding myself that, okay, my daughter's 7. So to her, this is like a real worry. And she may not be worrying about the things, the bigger worries that I'm worrying about, but to her, these are her worries, and not, not swooping those under the rug per se, but really listening to her and validating her worries, and reminding them that they can, talk about anything. And in the high school level, I think it's important to remind them of, the severity of the situation that we're in, and that they need to take it seriously, but also not making them more fearful. So that's kind of, interesting dilemma I have in my home, because my teenagers seem to think they're invincible, but then also, you don't want them to be, overly fearful either. So I think those are great tips. And then the real talk, captivate your audience, talk while in the car. I think this is a huge one for me. I have a lot of one-on-one time with each of my kids in the car. We spend a lot of time in the car, and sometimes even in households, it seems silly, but they may not be comfy talking about certain things in front of siblings, like, oh, you're scared of that. And then they kind of poke at each other, or roast each other, as they call it. But making sure that they feel like they can talk, and having that one-on-one time in the car. Anybody else have any experiences of talking in the car?
And I think it comes with that eye contact. Sometimes you're as a mom, you're driving and they're in the back seat, and you don't have to look face to face and have those conversations. And it's easier to have that conversation when you don't have to make that eye contact, that you can have it. And there's the distractibility of maybe being on the road, and there's other things there that they feel like we can have this conversation, but it's not as intense as sitting on the living room couch having a conversation.
I agree. I think it takes away the seriousness, or the, oh, this is a, mom talk or dad talk, or it's more light, but you can still have those important conversations. Anyone else? No? Okay. Time to talk, even when inconvenient. I think this is a huge one. I try to, and I started this a long time ago when my kids were really young, like checking in with them at night. I do this with my kids at school, check in, check out. I do it multiple times a day, and I don't, make it a big deal, but just having those few minutes at different times. And ours happens to be bedtime, because it's a time when we're all at home. I just go into each of their rooms and, ask about their favorite part of their day, or anything happened that didn't bother you. And it's the same similar questions, but it's a good time to kind of work in some questions of, things that are going on, and making it relevant to, going back to school, getting back in a routine, things like that. It's not always convenient to do it at night, and it might not work for every household. Some people might like to talk to their kids in the morning when they're getting them up, but trying to have a check-in time for each one of your kids, I feel like, is super important, even if it's inconvenient. And even if they find it inconvenient, you never know when it's going to be that night that they might say something. You're like, oh, this is the reason I do this. Thanks for reminding me. So anybody else have good check-in times with their kids?
I was about to say, my kids are usually at night as well. That's the first time that since they're in separate rooms, I could actually talk individually to one, and the other one's not arguing with him or butting in or anything. So that is convenient for us as well in our household.
Awesome.
I will chime in on that one. Ours is at night as well, and we kind of have a reflection time, and it's also your time. Just like it's important to start the day in a positive way, you want them to feel loved and kind of calm any fears or worries they may have before they're going to sleep, so they can rest and relax. And so that check-in time at night is kind of my little's time to just decompress from the day and kind of talk through anything that she may be thinking about, and just, some hugs, snuggles, saying, okay, I love you no matter what happens during the day. I love you, and we're going to get some rest, and we're going to try it all again tomorrow.
Yeah. Another thing I do a lot, and this just kind of reminded me, sometimes, I don't know if your kids do this, but sometimes even in work and at home, sometimes people or kids will be like, hey, they'll like drop something big in my lap at the most inconvenient time. And I always try to, even if we can't talk about it then, I always try to table it and say, okay, we're going to come back to it. And I give them a time when we're going to come back and talk to it. I hear you. We're going to talk about this. And this is when we're going to talk about it. So not only saying we'll talk about it later, but giving them a time frame. I know we can't always give them exact times, but I do feel like sometimes they say things at inconvenient times for a reason. But, setting a time to tabling it, but, identifying when you're going to come back to it, I think is important too for parents. But
that was one of the best parenting tips I got from Sue Bridges, former principal at A.G. Richardson. As my kids are approaching teenage years, she said, sometimes they're going to want to tell you something you need to hear at the most inconvenient time. So take time then, or make sure you schedule it. But you're going to want to listen. And I found that to be very good advice. And then also learning how to read each of my girls, because they're very different, of knowing when, oh, okay, she really wants to talk. We're going to schedule this in and go quickly.
Yeah,
so
exactly. And the unspoken, I think, is another important. We all know our kids, and we know when they're trying to say something, but they're not. And maybe the unspoken words, I think, is going to be very crucial with going back to school, to reading our kids, and maybe the things they're not saying. Just keeping a closer eye on those things, I think, is important as well.
I think that's important, especially with the little ones, because I know sometimes my little one, she will act out, or she's a little more testy and not as cool as she normally would be. And that lets me know she's struggling with something. She's processing something, and just picking up on those cues, and then maybe finding that time for, okay, hey, let's go have some lunch together, or, let's hang out and watch a movie together. And it puts her in that frame of mind where she's more willing to talk about it. But I can tell when she has those signs, hey, she's struggling with something like being out for COVID. She has struggled not having friends because she's an only. And so she has struggled with that a lot. And I can tell sometimes when she's missing that, she needs that extra care. She needs that extra attention.
Exactly.
That's me. All right. Expert tip, get back in a routine. I cannot say this one enough. Kids thrive on routine. Even high school kids thrive on routine. They need to know what's coming next. If you're eating your meals at a certain time, or breakfast, I cannot say breakfast enough as a routine. I know a lot of our kids come and eat breakfast at school, but whatever it is, making sure that your morning looks similar each day, and they know what to expect next. If they're expected to put their outfit out for the day, and these are the 3 things you need to have done while mom is getting ready. I know that in our house we do that. Okay, I expect for you to get dressed and brush your teeth and put your shoes on by the time I have my coffee ready. So, just making sure they understand what's expected. So there's not that extra stressor in the morning. Come on, let's go. Let's get out the door. Waking up. This one will be rough over the next week. Waking up, trying to make that a consistent time. And that goes right with bedtime. We have started putting my little one to bed a little earlier, but they will be resistant to that. And our remote kids, that will be something that you will struggle with, because putting them on a schedule, and especially on those 3 days for our blended kids where they would be at home, still keeping them on a schedule, having them do the same things at the same time each day, logging in at the same time for the same things each day. That is going to be very important moving forward for our kids to be productive in this environment. Physical activity. When they're at school, they may have more opportunity for that. But if they're remote or on those remote days, I put that into their schedule because they need that time to step away from what they're doing, that break of time and that physical activity to get their body going. Um, Real talk, family outings. No matter what your family environment looks like, kids need to feel that sense of community within your family. Taking the time to do something together that's fun, I think, is super important. And that makes your kid feel valued and also a part of your family. Not just it's the parents and the kids do whatever the parents say. If they're involved in that outing, it makes them feel a part of the family. And I feel like that's really important. And that's real talk from a parent. And getting outdoors. We live in one of the most beautiful places, and we're about to be in the most beautiful season. And getting them outdoors for some fresh air, especially on those remote days, on those if you're remote learning or on those days when they're not at school, getting them into the outdoors, just getting that fresh air, I think is a super important aspect. And just, I think it's that break that they need to come back and then work on what they need to at school. And a family outing outdoors, even better.
Just a little real talk. First, we all know summer's the best season. Beyond that, mommy confession, that routine, the wake up time, I have not done well at that. And I know Monday is coming. And so we've talked about it and getting in the routine, but I haven't quite held them accountable for getting up at that time yet. We have a new puppy, so that's kind of helping to take care of it. But I know that one is coming. And then getting them, scheduling the routine, and then figuring out how to check in when they're home between my husband and I, and figuring that out just to build some accountability into that routine. But they have not been up and on the computer at 7:45, and that's going to come on Monday.